You're watching PCTV Channel 17, proudly serving the Port Clinton City School District community. The following is a production of the Port Clinton High School Digital Media class.
Welcome to Time for Health. I'm your host, Rachel Fall, and we're very glad you've joined us. We hope you gained something from the program that helps you and your loved ones. We want to arm everyone with as much information as possible so we can all make good choices. This is not to take the place of regular medical care, so be sure to include your healthcare provider in on your plans and your conversations. And today our topic is mental health issues, and our guest is Laura Miller. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're the expert in the area for me today. So you're the director of the Firelands Counseling and Recovery, and that's on Buckeye Boulevard in Port Clinton, right?
Yes, okay. Firelands Counseling and Recovery has the offices on Buckeye Boulevard and then one in Genoa.
Okay, that's right. There is another one in Ottawa County. Great. So when we talk about mental health, what is it? What isn't it? What do people commonly think of?
I think most people, when they think of mental health issues, they think of depression, they think of suicide. Sure. But mental health issues can be something, simple, like having adjustment issues if there's like a relationship that ended, or loss of a job, or troubles in school.
Okay.
Just something, more severe, like a severe depression, or schizophrenia, bipolar.
Okay.
And it impacts adults and youth.
Okay, sure.
So for adults, the statistics show that 1 in 5 adults have some type of mental health issue in a year's time, and the statistics are the same for youth as well.
Okay. So it can be something that is kind of short-lived, mental health issue, and something that is something more long-term and something a little more severe as well.
Absolutely. And so the difference is, most people have a day that, they're a little bit more sad. Something's not going well. But it's not a long-lasting type of thing. And it's a phase that they go through. It's a couple days' time. But the difference with depression that you would definitely want to get treatment for is if somebody was having depression to the point that, is impacting their concentration, their problem solving.
Okay.
Like maybe they're not sleeping as well as they usually did, or it's affecting their appetite. And this type of depression is to the point that it's impacting their ability to do their daily things.
Okay.
So again, in contrast, the person who might be a little bit sad or having a tough time, they're still able to get up and go to school, or get up and go to work and do the things that they usually do. But it's considered more of an issue if it is impacting their ability to take care of their home, or their relationships, their work, and certainly, this has gone on for, say, 2 weeks' time. And certainly if they're having any thoughts of suicide, any thoughts of harming themselves or others, that's a very red flag that they definitely want to seek treatment.
Okay. So that's it can kind of run the gamut. It affects youth and it affects adults as well. Can be kind of short-lived, can be a little bit more long-term. So you talked a little bit about the signs and symptoms, like not being able to concentrate and different things, but what are some other things that people should look for within themselves, or if they know somebody that they're like, this is a little bit different than how they normally are? What are some signs that they would look for?
And I think one of the key things you said is if someone's different than they normally are.
Okay.
So lots of times we look for changes in somebody. So when I mentioned, depression, impacting, say, sleep or appetite, there's some people that normally don't need a whole lot of sleep, and that's just how they are.
Okay.
But if somebody's, let's say you have a family member who is suddenly sleeping in excess. Okay. For them, excess is, 8, 9, 10 hours. For somebody else, that could be normal.
Normal, okay.
But looking for a change in that, if they seem sad or mopey, certainly if they're starting to talk about things like, these would be signs of suicide concerns. If they're talking about signs that life isn't worth living, that maybe they wouldn't be around much longer, that people don't need them a sense of hopelessness, worthlessness.
Okay.
And certainly if they're saying anything about people will be better off without them, that might be a sign that they're thinking about suicide.
Okay.
So taking all those types of signs seriously.
Okay. And then is there kind of a threshold where they should call, or is it better to call and seek help no matter what?
I think it's always better safe than sorry,
Yeah.
to seek treatment.
Sure.
So if you're worried, if you see some signs or concerns that somebody may be depressed, and certainly if they're talking about suicide, you want to reach out for help immediately. It's
Right.
not something to wait on. And if you talk to the person and it turns out that they're not having thoughts of suicide, then it's good that you checked.
Right.
It's absolutely fine. But you can always reach out for help.
When you talk about signs of suicide, like should a friend or a family member literally say, are you thinking about taking your own life? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Is that what it's okay to say that? It seems so direct and but.
I think the topic of suicide, actually, I know the topic of suicide is scary for a lot of people. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that if I ask the person about suicide, that's going to give them the idea.
Gotcha.
And all the research shows that is not true.
Okay.
That it really is important just to ask them.
Okay.
And it feels awkward and weird to ask somebody this
Sure.
question, but just to say, I'm worried about you. You seem like you're not yourself lately. Are you having thoughts of suicide?
Okay.
Just very directly and, in a quiet place, not with a bunch of people around.
Right. Right.
And to ask them right away. It's not something to say,
Right.
well, maybe next week I'll check in on them and ask them then. No, I always encourage people, right then to talk to them.
Sure.
If you see the signs or symptoms, or even if you just have that gut feeling, something's not right, something's wrong. Sometimes people are also afraid that, well, if I ask them this question, they'll be mad at me. And most of the time, people, if they know that you care, and you're coming from a side of caring, they're
Right.
not going to be mad.
Right.
And you potentially are saving a life.
Right.
So it's important to ask.
And even if they are mad, you're still potentially saving a life. So it's okay to have somebody mad at you for a little bit.
Absolutely.
You talked about adults and children. Does depression or does schizophrenia or anxiety, does that look different in kids? Are there different signs in children? Or is it all a matter of things are different than what they normally are?
There are similarities and there are some differences, especially in younger youth. They're not going to verbalize and say, I've been feeling depressed lately.
Right.
Or, they're not going to, say those type of words. So their symptoms might come out more behaviorally.
Okay.
The irritability, maybe some acting out.
Okay.
Actually, something that I think is interesting is that anxiety is actually the #1 mental health issue in adults and kids, and the average onset is 11 years of age. So when I first heard that years ago, it really surprised me that 11. That it's kind of sad to think that 11-year-olds, that's the average onset, but those symptoms might come out as, again, some irritability, maybe scared, difficulty sleeping. It might impact their appetite.
Okay.
So seeing changes in those type of things.
Okay.
Or certainly if schoolwork is faltering or they're having difficulties with friends, that would be a time just to talk and ask what's going on.
Okay. Now, if some of these things are creeping up for somebody, what do they do? Like if it's a child, you talk to somebody at the school. If it's an adult, you call one of the mental health agencies. Where do they go? Or who do they call?
I would say a lot of people actually start with a family physician because it's interesting.
Absolutely.
A lot of mental health issues look like physical issues. When you think about, like I said, about sleep problems, appetite
eating,
problems, feeling lethargic. Those are physical symptoms. So sometimes people end up talking to their family physician and ruling out to make sure there's not something medically going on. Some family physicians feel very comfortable in prescribing medications if that's what they feel is needed. But as far as mental health resources, a lot of people don't realize that right here in Ottawa County, we have a lot of resources available. And it's one of those things that you hear that people don't seek out treatment. You know, on average, 40%, and this is American statistics, but I assume, you know, for the whole country, but it applies to Ottawa County as well, that only 40% of people with mental health issues in a year actually seek treatment. And so that's very few. And I think a lot of the reason, well, there's many barriers to treatment, we can talk about that. But one of the reasons is they're just not aware of the resources.
What's out there.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I was excited when you asked me to come today. So I could explain that there are lots of resources in Ottawa County for mental health, you know, and drug and alcohol issues. Here in Ottawa County, we do have the agency I'm with, Firelands Counseling and Recovery Services. The local Mental Health and Recovery Board does contract with Firelands and Bayshore Counseling. And then there's also another provider, Choices, in town.
Okay.
And so we have different opportunities. And we also have the office in Genoa, so trying to, you know, the distance.
Meet people wherever they need to be.
Absolutely.
I mean, do they literally just call and say, I'm depressed, I need to talk to somebody, or I think my spouse is depressed, or my best friend is depressed? They just, that's all they have to say, and someone will kind of take it from there?
Yeah, again, I think sometimes people feel awkward, like, I don't know what to say when I call, what will I say? And exactly like you just said, you know, call and say, I'm having some difficulties and I feel I need to talk to somebody. And, you know, if you want to talk to a supervisor just to kind of, you know, tease out what the process would be, you could ask to talk to a supervisor. But like at our agency, our secretaries are prepared to, you know, gather the information and get things set up.
Okay.
Typically, the process would be, and I can only speak for Firelands, but I think it would be the same for most agencies, because this is how the process usually works, that you would meet with a therapist who would do an assessment. And the assessment really looks at the full person. You know, we look at, you know, what are the concerns, you know, what are the symptoms, you know, what is it that you're wanting to change. But we also look at a person's strengths, you know, their abilities. You know, what do they have going for them? What are their coping skills they have? Because although when a person is feeling down, when they're not themselves, they're anxious, depressed, maybe a more severe mental health issue like schizophrenia or bipolar, they often don't feel that they have any strengths.
Right.
But we want to help point out that they do, because we use those strengths that they have to help them in their recovery.
Okay.
And we look at the whole person. And so we would gather that information and then make treatment recommendations.
Okay.
So most of the time they could benefit from counseling services, whether it's individual, family counseling. Maybe medications would be useful. Also, case management is used for people who have some more severe, persistent mental illness.
Okay.
And case managers work with somebody to, let's say somebody doesn't know how to find resources. They don't know how to apply for assistance or Medicaid, or they don't have the skills to know how to contact agencies to get the help they need, or to keep up with things. The case manager can teach those skills and help them with that.
So you don't necessarily, we're going to take a break, but just call and someone will help you from there. You don't have to know or think you know what your diagnosis is, or what your plan will be, or what you're going to do. If something is not right, just call, and there's a whole team of people, no matter where you call, there's a whole team of people that's going to kind of help figure out what you need to do next.
Absolutely.
Right, very good. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. And we're back, and we're talking about mental health issues with Laura Miller from Firelands. Thank you for being here again. Talked a little bit about the process, how either talking to a person to make sure they're okay can be a little awkward, or knowing what all the resources might be unfamiliar to people. There certainly are a lot of them. And so you talked about a few of the agencies in Ottawa County that you just call. You just tell them either how you're feeling. Can a person call for a family member?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
A child or spouse or a friend, they can call and kind of, and it's not the person calling or the person who's feeling anxious or depressed, they don't have to necessarily know it, because there are psychiatrists, there are counselors. Sometimes medication is appropriate, sometimes not necessarily. That's not for us to figure out. That's for the professionals to figure out. So we don't need to add that to the list of things that cause us stress. But calling those resources, you talked a little bit about, or you mentioned barriers, that there are a lot of resources out there, and hopefully as we get the word out, people will be more comfortable. But it's still uncomfortable, there's still barriers, there's still a stigma attached to that. Talk a little bit about that.
I think mental health has come a long way over the years, but there still is a lot of stigma. And I really try to emphasize to people there should be no shame or embarrassment in getting mental health issues. I mean, if you had diabetes, you wouldn't be embarrassed to go get help.
Right.
And so it should be the same with mental health issues, that just like any other medical issue, you're just going to get help for it. As far as barriers, sometimes people are concerned about payment.
Okay.
And I will say that our local mental health and recovery board is very concerned about that, and that's
Right.
the reason that they contract with Firelands and Bayshore for the sliding fee scale.
Okay.
So sometimes I have someone say, I don't have a job, I don't have money, and I can't get help. Actually, with the sliding fee scale, if you don't have any income, then your services would be free.
Okay.
And if someone is concerned, well, what is my income and where would I fall? They could just call and ask,
Okay.
and get their information ahead of time, and that makes perfect sense.
That would definitely be a barrier. How to pay
Yeah.
for it just kind of adds to the stress of the whole thing. So that's one of the things that, again, that team of people can help them work out.
Absolutely.
What about, we talked about some of the agencies and the phone numbers and everything, but what about some websites? I know a lot of people, this might be because there's still, a little discomfort about it. So if somebody wanted to look at a credible website, because I'm sure there are many sketchy websites and sources out there.
I would recommend two in particular that I like: the National Alliance on Mentally Ill, often referred to as NAMI.
Okay.
They have a website, and within their website is lots of information, and they have these fact sheets, they call them.
Okay.
And it can give you information on specific illnesses, all kinds of very simple and easy to read information.
Okay.
The other would be through SAMHSA,
Okay.
and that's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.
Oh my.
So we'll give you that information
Yeah.
to put up, but SAMHSA has lots of wonderful information as well, very credible, and I would look there. Our local Mental Health and Recovery Board of Erie and Ottawa County, they also have a website, and so they have some information on there,
Okay.
but I would start with those.
Sure. Because, and again, starting with some ones that that a professional recommends versus, Billy Bob's website on
Yeah.
mental illness might not be where you want to look.
Well, and even in town, we do have a local NAMI group that meets at
Yeah.
Magruder Hospital.
Yep, they do have a couple.
So they have that. There is the Oak House, which is a peer-run support group
Yep.
facility on Buckeye Boulevard as well. They're
Yep.
open to people with mental health issues. They have activities and different programs to provide support.
Lots of sources.
Lots of
out there.
resources, right?
Yeah. Now you mentioned, and I was kind of thinking along the lines of anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, the things we maybe hear about a little more often. But you mentioned substance abuse. That is also in the mental health realm often.
Very often we call it co-occurring disorders, where people have more than one issue.
Okay.
And so often we find that the people have maybe depression, and a substance abuse issue.
Okay.
So really the goal is to treat both issues at the same time. In order to help one, you have to work on the other.
Sure.
So really you treat them simultaneously.
Does one lead to the other, or like the chicken and the egg? It's kind of like you're depressed, so you
Yeah.
start,
Yeah.
using alcohol and then abusing alcohol, or
Every
if you abuse a
situation's-
substance, it leads to mental health issues down the road. It's just,
It goes both directions.
Okay.
Absolutely.
and so all these same resources can help with those as well.
Absolutely, yes.
So counselors have backgrounds and training in the whole rainbow of issues that a person might come in with.
Right, and you would want to check with the agency. Depends on the therapist's credentialing. You know, they all have some training
Sure.
in mental health and drug and alcohol. At our office at Firelands, all of our therapists are able to do both.
Okay.
And so it is nice to be able to treat both issues at the
Sure.
same time.
And are there counselors that, I'm just thinking about physicians as well, that sort of specialize in families or children, or have some extra in schizophrenia or substance abuse? Some of them might specialize in those areas too, but you just have to ask.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is a crisis hotline, I know. Talk about that.
If anybody was feeling in crisis, and crisis is a relative thing, so it means something different to everybody, but certainly have any thoughts of harming themselves or others, any thoughts of suicide, could call the local hotline.
Okay.
And I'll say that's 1-800-826-1306, and we'll put that up as well. But that's also something that a family member, if they're concerned,
Oh, okay.
my husband is depressed and he's saying these things and we don't know what to do. The
Okay.
family member could call the hotline and get some direction so they know that they're never alone. The person with the issues is never alone. The family member is never alone. You can always call and get
that's
some
24/7?
direction. Absolutely.
365.
Yep.
That's nice to know that it's there. It's a safety net. Now, if somebody might not be what I would consider a crisis, they're just don't know where to turn, or just having a particularly bad day, maybe not necessarily like considering hurting themselves or others, can they still call the hotline?
Yes, absolutely. There's a continuum of reasons people call the hotline,
Okay.
even if you just want to gather information on resources. If you're having a tough day, like you said,
Yeah.
and need someone to talk through, get some reminders of coping skills, they can help with that.
Okay. You did a program a couple times in the recent past called Mental Health First Aid, and which I just think is fantastic. So talk about that.
Mental Health First Aid is a 8-hour training that anybody can come to. And we provide it at no cost, so there's no cost. But it is a evidence-based program that teaches people how to recognize signs that someone may be in crisis. It educates a little bit on different mental health diagnoses, how to recognize someone may be in crisis, and how to respond to that, how to get them the help they need. So kind of like, CPR, there's steps for
Sure.
that. There's steps in mental health first aid.
Okay.
And so the idea is that you might be there to see someone, recognize the signs of crisis, and then be able to get them to the help that they need.
Gotcha.
Just like CPR, you would call 911.
Right.
There's steps for mental health first aid.
Okay.
And you're right, we recently had a couple programs. We'll have another one in January. So
Okay.
watch for information on that, because anyone would be allowed to
So it's
come
not
to
just
that.
for counselors or nurses, it's for lay people, for the public.
Yes, anybody.
Okay. So it's a good thing maybe for, I don't know, it's a good thing for anybody to take, but
We've had family members,
Sure.
people from many of the social service agencies around
Mm-hmm.
here. It actually would not be appropriate for a mental health therapist because they would already know those things.
they would have their training.
It
there.
actually is for just the general public,
Okay.
anybody. And the goal is we can reduce stigma, and it's proven to help reduce stigma and get people to the help they need if they're in crisis.
Gotcha.
I'll tell you quickly, we also have a program called QPR. Now that's just a 1-hour program that we can provide, and it's the purpose of that is also on suicide prevention.
Okay.
And so that's something that we could offer for any types of groups, anybody who would be interested in a 1-hour program.
Sure.
To look at the myths about suicide, warning signs, and then what to do. How to ask that suicide question, because it does feel awkward, and then how to get the person to the help that they need.
Okay. And that's just a 1-hour program.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Just to kind of arm, like we do with the show, just to arm
Yeah.
everyone with information, just in case you're in a situation where you notice something like that happening in somebody.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. Any other thoughts, things you just wish people would know, or information you want to share?
I think one of the most important things is to recognize that mental health issues, and sometimes I call it an equal opportunity problem. I mean, anybody could have mental health issues. It could be me, it could be you. You know, if they say that 1 in 5 Americans have a mental health issue, it really could be anybody. So don't be afraid to get help.
Right.
You know, don't be embarrassed. You know, a lot of people beat themselves up. You know, why me? You know, am I just not working hard enough, or am I weak, or is there something wrong? And those are old stigma ideas that we need to get rid of. That getting help is something that everybody should do. Right. Just like if you had a cold or a problem, yeah, you would go to your doctor. So get help for the mental health issue. Because
like you mentioned, there are physical places and actual live local people around that can help. There are websites, there are hotlines, there are classes, there are support groups, there's the Oak House. There's a lot of resources out there, and don't be afraid to ask, it sounds like. Awesome. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we're going to take another break and we'll be right back. And we're back. I want to thank Laura for being our guest today, talking about mental health issues. She's very right. There is confusion or discomfort. There's uncertainty about the topic. But as she mentioned, 1 in 5 adults, 1 in 5 youth are probably dealing with a mental health issue of some sort, either them or a family member. So there are websites, there are agencies, there are phone numbers, there are hotlines, like we mentioned. Lots of them in Ottawa County. We're going to list them. Pay attention to them, write them down. You can call one of the agencies to get more information. You can call me at the hospital, I'll give it to you. The Mental Health and Recovery Board of Erie and Ottawa County is a great resource. NAMI, SAMHSA. The hotline again is 1-800-826-1306. Firelands Counseling on Buckeye Boulevard. Bayshore Counseling, Choices. There's lots out there. Don't be afraid to use it. If you ever have feedback about a program, or if you have a suggestion for a future episode, please let us know by sending a note to Time for Health, 615 Fulton Street, Port Clinton, Ohio, 43452. Or you can email Mrs. Pelz at the high school, cpelz at pccsd-k12.net. So especially today, think about this topic. Think about something that you heard today, whether it's important for you or somebody you know. Use the information, and until we meet again, I encourage you to make time for health.